So what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you a story now that is disgusting and ridiculous, but I'll ask you to listen to it. You really don't have a choice. It will be disgusting and ridiculous, and I do want you to think of it the next time that you have a problem to solve in your business or maybe your even personal life, or you think you have a problem to solve. So this is a story about a Japanese college student named Kobe. And Kobe was studying economics. He had very little money. His mother ended up being ill. His father, I believe, was essentially the janitor in a Buddhist monastery. And he had so little money. He lived with his girlfriend, and in their apartment, their electricity got cut off. They couldn't even pay the power bill. So they were struggling. And his girlfriend, whose name was Kumi, Kumi spotted something on TV where she thought that Kobe could make a bunch of quick money, $5,000. And it was an eating contest. And she mentioned it to him, and he thought this was kind of strange because he's a little guy, he's about 5'4", and even though he had a good appetite, he wasn't, any kind of human vacuum. There was nothing in the past really to indicate that he could eat a whole lot, but he was smart and he was strategic. And in studying economics, he'd been studying game theory in particular, which game theory is basically about how to, when you're in a competition, how to proceed based on how you think your opponents will proceed as well. And so he studied this competition, this eating contest, and it was going to be on TV, and it was a 4-stage contest. You had to eat, like, first a bowl of a seafood bowl, then some Mongolian barbecued mutton, and then some rice and all these things. And you had to do it pretty quickly, and it was disgusting, but he looked at it, and in previous contests he saw that most people, when they would come out to do the first stage, you only advance if you rank high enough in the first stage, and then so on as you go. And he saw that most competitors would just eat so much in the first stage, and then the second, that they'd be exhausted and too full to really do well. So he thought, well, at the very least, I'm going to kind of hang back, try to look around as I go, and eat the minimum I need to advance in each of the levels, and then on the 4th level, I'll have enough left and I can blitz and try to win it. And he did, and he won. And he won $5,000, which was great. He is a competitive guy, and also he wanted more money. And so he thought, what if I can take my first victory and turn myself into an actual professional competitive eater? And there actually is a sport of competitive eating based primarily in New York. There's an organization called the International Federation of Competitive Eating, IFOCE, and the big contest where all the money and all the glamour is, it's the Super Bowl of competitive eating, happens once a year here in New York at the Nathan's famous 4th of July Coney Island hot dog eating contest, okay? And this contest had been going on for many, many years, many competitors, and the world record at the time was 25 1/8 hot dogs and buns in 12 minutes, okay? So just think about that for a second. I don't know, has anybody here ever actually eaten more than like 5 hot dogs, even in a whole sitting? I'd be curious to know if, right, so we could all agree that like 5 hot dogs in an evening would be a lot, but the record was 25 1/8. It's written down as HDB, hot dogs and buns. You have to eat all of each. And there aren't many rules. The rules are basically you have to eat the whole thing. You can drink as much of anything as you want while you're eating. You may use condiments, but only, an amateur is going to take time to put ketchup on your hot dog in a contest. And the only other thing is if any of the hot dog and bun that you're eating, after it goes in, if it comes out, they call this in the trade a reversal of fortune, you can be disqualified for that. So basically, the rules are very simple. Eat a lot of hot dogs, as many as you can in 12 minutes with as much beverage as you want, and that's it, okay? So he looked at this contest, and he thought, I am going to spend my time here before July training and strategizing for this. How do I do that? Okay. He wanted to practice a lot. That's the first thing. how was he going to practice? In Japan, he could not get hold of hot dogs. They weren't so easy to find, and they were very expensive. So he had to practice with these sausages that were made of minced fish that were a little like hot dogs, but not quite as dense. It also takes money and time, because before you practice every time, you have to cook up all the dogs. For buns, he couldn't find hot dog buns, so he'd buy bread and cut it to size, and he'd cook it all and then lay it out here. Now he begins to do what we all should do, which is experiment, okay? And, you know, when you look at the competitors at Coney Island, they all eat pretty much the same way, which is there's a big pile of dogs in front of them. They grab one, and they shove it in, end to end, just like we would do at home, but faster, and then their mouths would get full, they'd take a big drink of water, swallow, and just do it again. So he thought, okay, in terms of speed, in terms of efficiency, what if, maybe this isn't a big deal, but what if, instead of just using both hands to shove the dog in, I just take it and break the dog? At the very least, now I've got two hands to feed my mouth instead of just one hand. Might that help a little bit? This move, by the way, to break the dog in two pieces, came to be known as the Solomon, after King Solomon in the Bible, who threatened to cut a baby in two, and there were two women who both claimed maternity, okay? So he starts by breaking the dog. Then he would feed right hand and feed left hand, but then he would see, wait a minute, there's a problem here. The problem is that when you're trying to chew a dog and bun, there's this conflict of density. Okay? So a dog is thick and chewy and dense, and the bun is light and airy. And trying to do them both at the same time was a little bit inefficient. So he started to separate the dog from the bun. So he's breaking it, then separating. So now he's starting to feed dogs with one hand, buns with the other hand. And then he found that the dogs, believe it or not, go down much easier. If you're willing to do this, which most of us are not, if you just take the dog and you just kind of like do that, they just go. You don't even need to chew a dog, as it turns out. Especially the American hot dogs, which are super slick and slippery. They just go down. But then, weirdly enough, the bun was harder because the bun takes up more room and you kind of have to chew the bun. If you try to slurp the bun, you choke. So then he thought, okay, now wait a minute. I am allowed to have as much beverage as I want, and most people just drink their beverage. What if I use that beverage in a slightly different way, which is to say, I break the dog, I separate the dog and bun, I slurp down the dog, and while I'm doing that with my right hand, I take my left hand and the bun, do this to it, smush it, and dunk it in my water. And I will soak my bun in the water. What happens now? So he began to experiment. He would spend entire days just soaking buns in water to determine the ultimate time, the ultimate temperature of the water, and what else you might want to put in the water. So it turns out that the best method was to soak the bun in very warm water, not hot, with a little bit of vegetable oil. Now, the warm water was key because when you were swallowing it then, the warm water would help relax your muscles all the way down, but also it added another bonus, which was efficiency. When you're soaking your bun in water until it's about to fall apart, then you squeeze it, and then you pop it in your mouth like a bun ball. Now it's a totally different kind of food. The beauty part of that is you no longer need to drink water after you slurp down the dog because you've already got the water. So all that time that these guys are spending drinking the water, he doesn't have to do that because it's just breaking, separating, slurping, soaking bun in water and eating it. Practicing, practicing, practicing. He videotaped every session. He experimented with pacing, whether to start fast, then drop back, then finish in a sprint. He realized that he should do weight training, that a big part of being able to do this incredibly disgusting thing is having really strong muscles all the way down. So he began to lift weights. He also experimented with kind of manipulating his whole body as he ate. So his ultimate routine ended up like he's breaking, separating, dunking in oil, dunking in water, and then he would kind of jump around like this while he's eating to get the stuff to go down. It's literally like he's building an assembly line to get rid of this plate of hot dogs. So he does everything he can think of, experiments, he does what he thinks is his best. He flies to New York. He shows up at Coney Island. It's a total, I don't know if you've ever been out there, it's a totally chaotic scene. It's 95 degrees and it's outdoors, and it's so disgusting because you're eating these big piles. Just the smell before you start is bad, and now you're eating all these dogs. And the other competitors thought that he was a high school kid who had come to watch. He was just this little guy, nobody knew anything about him. He goes in the contest, 12 minutes. He not only competes well, but he wins his very first contest. And he not only wins, but he sets a new world record in his very first contest. And he not only sets a new world record, the old record I said was 25 1/8 HDB. So you could think, well, maybe he did substantially better. What would substantially better be? 10%? Maybe 20%? 20% improvement would be 30 dogs, right? That would be mind-boggling. And again, hundreds of people have been doing this for many, many years. This guy, full name Takeru Kobayashi, the name you may recognize, eats on his first time out 50 hot dogs and buns in 12 minutes. Mind-blowing. It was so much that the organizers of the event, they hold up signs as the guys are going. They didn't have numbers going up past 30 even, because nobody had ever done it. So this was unbelievable, and it was no fluke. He ended up winning this thing 6 years in a row. Of course, people were excited, but also Americans, I hate to say it, we do tend towards xenophobia once in a while. And there were certain people, especially as competitors, who didn't like the idea of a Japanese champion winning this hot dog contest. And so there were all kinds of accusations about how he really did it, right? So that people said that he had taken warm stones and swallowed them to stretch out his stomach. My favorite theory was that he was an agent of a Japanese government plot to kind of make Americans feel bad, and that Japanese surgeons had theoretically implanted a second esophagus and stomach into his body. None of this was true. He had done this thing by doing this thing and by studying how he was going to do it and strategizing. Maybe the best evidence that he didn't cheat and was not just a freak of nature was that eventually he began to get beat. So now there's a guy named Joey Chestnut who beats Kobayashi regularly. Both of them now eat in the neighborhood of 70 dogs in 10 minutes. So they've continued to improve. Okay, now, you could say it's nothing but a freak story, which is most of the stories that we tell are, about one guy who triumphed at this thing that really nobody cares about at all. And that may be true. That may be true. But for 1 minute, entertain me, and let me suggest 3 lessons that I think we can all take away from the success of Takeru Kobayashi. Lesson number 1. What he did was he redefined the problem that he was trying to solve. Okay? So what Kobayashi saw when he looked at all the other competitors were basically big guys who tended to eat a lot. The typical competitive eater is like the frat guy who will order and eat 2 pizzas by himself. That was kind of the profile. And what he said is, I see why they're doing what they're doing, and I see who they are, but what they're trying to do essentially is to take the act of eating every day, which we all do all the time, and just do it more, and just do it kind of magnified. And in his mind, this was a faulty parallel. In his mind, that would be like saying, I want to run a marathon, and I know how to walk. I walk all the time every day. I may even be able to run. I mean, I'm a runner, sort of. I run I can run 5 miles a day. I will never run a marathon. I'm mentally and physically way too weak to ever run a marathon. After 5 miles, I'm like, okay, I get it. That's running, and I'm not going to do it for 26 miles. But Kobayashi was basically looking at this and saying, running a marathon is to walking as competitive eating is to everyday eating. It's different. It requires a different set of strategies, of tactics, of training all the way. And so he treated it differently. He redefined the problem. Just like if you have a firm and you're getting beat all of a sudden by a competitor and you think it's because they have this great ad campaign, it's very easy to attribute causes, or effects rather, to causes that you see right in front of you. But it may have nothing to do with that. So he did a very good job of defining the problem that he was actually trying to solve, which is how do I treat competitive eating like a sport and not an extension of everyday eating. The second lesson I think we can draw from Kobayashi is the idea of not accepting a barrier that turns out to be an artificial barrier. So like I said, the old record was 25 and a shade. First time out, he went to 50. So let's take the most famous race in humankind, the 100-meter dash. Usain Bolt is currently the world record holder with 9.84, something in that neighborhood, okay? So look about the margin of victory that Kobayashi did with hot dogs to go from 25 to 50. He doubled it. Think about Usain Bolt running a 100-meter dash in under 5 seconds, okay? We think that's probably physiologically impossible. With Kobe, it wasn't physiologically, there is a physiological limit to how high he can go, but it certainly wasn't 30, and it wasn't even 40, and as it turns out, it wasn't even 50. If, however, he had come into this thinking 25 is the upper bound of human consumption of hot dogs and buns in 12 minutes, then there's no way he would have gone to 50. It was a barrier that turned out to be a kind of cognitive barrier, an artificial one. I think the best example, the simplest example in our lives, imagine that you want to do a little bit of exercise. You say, I want to do some push-ups. And you decide, I'm going to do 20 push-ups. When do you start to get physically and mentally really tired? Probably around 14, 15, 16, because you've set that barrier in your head. Pretend on a different day, same person, you say, I'm going to do 30 push-ups. When do you start to get physically and mentally tired? Not around 14, 15, or 16. It'll probably be around 22, 23, 24. Now, there are limits. You're not going to do 1,000 in likelihood. But the fact is that we all the time, all of us, pay too much attention and are too obedient toward barriers that are artificial. When someone says something can't be done, it can't be done that well, it can't be done this way, it hasn't been done. So I would just encourage all of us to take a look at the next time you're trying to solve any problem and to ask yourself if the barrier that you think is there is as real as you fear it is. And the third lesson I think we can all draw from Takeru Kobayashi, which we can all do anytime, anywhere, even if we're not hoping to become a competitive eating champion, is to whenever you have the opportunity, you should always soak your buns in warm water. Thank you. I'll give Levitt another shot. Thank you.